Chapter 1. The Calm Before the Storm. The garage door moaned open as Julian pulled his old silver Tacoma into the driveway. The evening light spilled over the neat row of suburban lawns, trimmed hedges, porch lights clicking on in unison like a rehearsed act of normalcy. Inside, the smell of takeout greeted him before he even stepped through the door. Thai food, Lena's favorite. He loosened his tie as he entered the kitchen. "Hey," he called out, his voice echoing softly in the quiet house. "Smells good in here." No answer. He followed the faint sound of laughter, sharp, melodic, not meant for him. She was in the living room, legs folded beneath her on the couch, still in her work clothes. A cream blouse tucked into a navy pencil skirt, one heel kicked off, hair pulled into a loose bun that framed her face perfectly. Her phone was in her hand, screen glowing against the dim light. "Long day?" Julian asked, setting his briefcase down. Lena jumped a little, then looked up and smiled. Too quickly. "Oh, hey. Yeah, just unwinding. You look tired." "Rough day." "The usual," he said, cracking open a bottle of water from the fridge. 3 client calls, a budget meeting that could have been an email, and traffic that made me reconsider humanity. She laughed, though her eyes were already drifting back to her screen. He leaned on the counter, watching her. That soft glow from her phone seemed to swallow her whole. She typed fast, thumb flying across the screen, then grinned at something she read. A sound escaped her, half laugh, half gasp. Julian tried to smile. Something funny? She locked the screen instinctively and set the phone face down on the couch. "Oh, just something stupid from work." "Yeah." He walked over, trying to peek without seeming like he was trying. "Something I'd find stupid too?" Lena's tone sharpened a fraction. "It's nothing, Julian. Just a meme. Don't start interrogating me." "I wasn't interrogating." He held up his hands. "Just trying to join the fun." "You've been tense lately," she said, brushing invisible lint from her skirt. "You come home and start analyzing everything." Julian chuckled without humor. "Sorry for noticing my wife's in her own world." Silence hung between them, thick as dust. The TV played a rerun of some reality show neither of them cared about. Lena broke it first. "You're hungry, right? I ordered pad thai and green curry. The place down on Maple." He nodded and moved to unpack the cartons, the small gestures of domestic life unfolding automatically. Forks clinked. Paper rustled. Steam rose from the containers like ghosts. "How was your day?" he asked after a moment. "Busy," she said flatly. "Meetings all morning. Lunch with the team. I had to help Jenna with that investor pitch deck. She's hopeless at formatting." He smiled faintly. "You always end up saving everyone else. That's what happens when you're the only competent person in the room." She said it playfully, but there was a hint of pride there too, almost defensiveness. They sat at the counter, eating in companionable silence for a few minutes. Julian stole glances at her between bites. She looked beautiful in that effortless, dangerous way, a woman who didn't even realize how easily she commanded attention. But there was something else tonight. A distance. When she checked her phone again and smiled to herself, Julian noticed the tiny muscle that twitched in her cheek, the one that always gave her away when she was hiding something. He couldn't help himself. "Who keeps making you smile like that?" She froze mid-scroll, then sighed. "God, Julian, do we have to do this?" "It's just work friends." "Work friends that text you after 8 p.m.? She set the phone down with a soft thud. "You know what? You got to stop overthinking everything. You act like I can't have a life outside this house." "That's not what I said." "That's what you imply." Her tone sharpened again. Julian exhaled slowly, trying not to bite back. "You've just seemed distracted. I miss how we used to talk." Now she looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time that night. Her eyes softened, then clouded with something unreadable. Guilt? Pity? "We still talk," she said finally. "Not really," he said quietly. "You talk. I listen. There's a difference." Her lips parted as if to argue, but the words didn't come. She grabbed her plate, stood, and carried it to the sink. "You're tired, Julian. You always come home drained, complaining about work, about life. It's like you're on autopilot." He frowned. "I'm trying, Lena. I work my ass off so we can have all this." He gestured vaguely at the house, the furniture, the silent TV flickering across their faces. You think this just happens? She turned on the faucet, rinsing her plate as if to drown out the conversation. You've become too serious lately. You used to be fun. The words hit harder than they should have. He stared at her back, the curve of her shoulders, the way her hair slipped loose from its bun. There was something distant in that silhouette, something untouchable. Maybe I'm serious because I care, he said finally, because I actually want us to work. She didn't turn around. We are working, she said softly, though it sounded more like she was trying to convince herself. Julian swallowed the rest of his frustration. He walked over, placed his hands gently on her shoulders. Hey, he said quietly. Look at me. She hesitated, then did. I don't want to fight with you, he said. I want to know what's going on in that head of yours. You've been miles away. Lena blinked. For a second, her eyes softened again, her guard slipping. It's just stress, she murmured. Work's been crazy. I don't want to bring that home. He nodded slowly, not entirely believing her, but unwilling to push further. All right, he said, forcing a small smile. Then this weekend, let's do something. Just us. Dinner somewhere nice. No phones, no work. She smiled, but it was small and tired. We'll see. He kissed her cheek, the contact brief, perfunctory. Don't stay up too late. Yeah, she said. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Her eyes darted to it before she caught herself. Julian walked down the hallway toward their bedroom, the sound of running water and clicking keys following him like whispers. He paused at the doorway, glancing back. Lena was laughing again, softly, into her phone. He shut the light off in the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, his chest heavy. The silence in the house wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loaded like a calm sky before lightning. He rubbed his temples, trying to convince himself it was nothing. Just stress. Just work. But deep down, in that quiet part of his gut that had never lied to him, something cold and familiar stirred. And from the kitchen, her voice floated down the hall, light and careless, as she said the words that would echo in his head for days. You become too serious lately. You used to be fun. Chapter 2, A Strange New Distance. The following week unfolded like a slow drift into silence. Julian noticed it in the smallest ways first. The way Lena's good morning kisses became quick, distracted pecks, her phone already in her hand before she'd even finished brushing her teeth. The way dinner conversations had shrunk into fragments. How was work? Fine. You? Busy. Every answer was busy. She'd started coming home later, always with a ready excuse. Sorry, we're finalizing the quarterly report. Or, my manager's been breathing down my neck, just one more presentation. At first, Julian believed her. He wanted to. Lena had always been career-driven, ambitious. That was part of what he admired about her. But lately, late had turned into midnight, and the excuses were starting to sound rehearsed. On a Thursday evening, Julian waited at the kitchen table, 2 plates of pasta growing cold. The clock ticked past 9. He finally called her. Straight to voicemail. At 10:48, headlights flashed across the window. The front door creaked open, and Lena stepped in, the faint smell of perfume and city air following her. Her hair was slightly tousled, makeup still perfect, though her expression carried a subtle impatience. You waited up? She asked, as if it were a surprise. Of course, Julian said evenly. It's almost 11. I told you I'd be late. Late's one thing, he replied. He gestured vaguely toward the clock. Got a whole new time zone. She sighed, setting down her purse. You're exaggerating again. I told you, we're slammed this week. You think I enjoy being stuck there this long? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, scraped his untouched plate into the trash, and said quietly, You used to text when you were running late. She rolled her eyes. I didn't think I needed a permission slip to work overtime. The word stung, sharp and clean. Never said you did, he said softly. Lena disappeared into the bedroom without another word. Julian stayed in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair across from him, the untouched glass of wine she'd never drink. 2 days later, he decided to fix it, to bridge whatever gap had opened between them. He texted her that morning. Julian, dinner Friday night? That new Italian place on 7th. Just us. No work, no phones. It took her nearly an hour to reply. Lena, I can't. Big deadline. Maybe next week? He forced a smile at his phone, though the words landed like stones. Maybe next week. That night, he came home to find her laptop open on the couch, spreadsheets on the screen, but no Lena in sight. The shower was running. Her phone buzzed beside the laptop. For a moment, he froze, eyes fixed on the screen. The notification preview was blank. She turned that setting off. It hadn't been like that before. When she emerged wrapped in a towel, he tried to sound casual. You've been logging a lot of late hours lately. She didn't look up from toweling her hair. Welcome to adulthood, Julian. We work. He smirked lightly. Guess I missed that memo. Her eyes flicked to him, irritated. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, he said, raising his hands. Just saying I miss seeing you before midnight. Well, maybe if you didn't fall asleep on the couch every night, you would. He laughed once dryly. Touché. That weekend, while grabbing coffee near his office, he ran into Brian, a colleague who also happened to know Lena from college. Hey, Julian, haven't seen you around in a while. Yeah, Julian said, shaking his hand, just grabbing a caffeine refill before heading back in. Brian leaned casually on the counter. Funny, I ran into Lena last week at that new cafe on Maple. She was with some guy. What's his name? Ryan something? They looked like they were catching up. Julian's stomach tightened. Ryan? Yeah, Ryan. You know, the one she used to date back in college. I only remembered because she introduced us once, years ago. Good guy. You still in touch with him? He forced a laugh. Not exactly. Brian shrugged. Probably nothing. She said it was a quick coffee before heading to work. Just surprised to see her in that part of town, that's all. Julian nodded, the rest of the conversation fading into static. When he got back to his office, he sat at his desk, staring at his monitor, the cursor blinking on a half-finished report. Coffee with her ex. He told himself it was innocent. Lena wasn't reckless. She wouldn't do that. Not her. And yet that night when she said, working late again, he noticed the subtle shift in tone, soft, almost defensive. He wanted to ask about Ryan, wanted to see her reaction, but some instinct told him not to. Not yet. By the following week, her habits had changed entirely. She kept her phone on silent, always face down. When he tried to use it once to check the time, it demanded a new passcode. Since when did you change this? He asked, showing her the lock screen. She didn't look up from her makeup mirror. Work requires stronger security now. IT's cracking down on privacy stuff. Right? He said flatly, setting it down. That night, she came home late again, smelling faintly of perfume he didn't recognize. She kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch beside him. The TV flickered with some mindless late-night show, but he wasn't watching. He studied her face, the tiny smudge of lipstick at the corner of her mouth, the slight flush that looked too much like laughter left over from someone else. Everything okay? He asked. Yeah, she said absently. Why? You seem different lately. She frowned. Different how? I don't know, he said carefully. You don't even look me in the eye anymore. Lena's head snapped toward him. Excuse me? You heard me. She scoffed, grabbing a throw pillow and hugging it against her chest. You're imagining things, Julian. Don't make me feel guilty for having a life. The sentence hung in the air, heavy and final. He stared at her, searching her face for something, remorse, truth, anything. But she had already turned back to the TV, her jaw tight, eyes focused on the meaningless glow of strangers laughing on screen. Good night, Lena, he said quietly, standing. Night, she murmured without looking at him. In the bedroom, Julian sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the dark hallway. The faint hum of the television reached him through the door. After a while, he heard it click off, the sound of her footsteps padding softly down the hall. The bed dipped as she climbed in beside him, already half asleep or pretending to be. He turned to face her, watching the steady rise and fall of her breathing, her phone still glowing faintly on the nightstand. Her face, peaceful in sleep, looked almost like the woman he used to know. But the stillness between them was no longer comfort. It was distance. Something fragile, invisible, beginning to crack beneath the weight of what neither of them would say aloud. He lay there in the dark, wide awake, and thought to himself, something's breaking, and I can feel it. Chapter 3, The Dinner Bombshell. Saturday morning began quietly. The kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful anymore, just empty. Julian woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Lena humming in the kitchen. For a brief moment, he thought maybe things were normal again. Maybe the late nights, the tension, the guarded phone, all of it was just stress. He walked in barefoot, rubbing his eyes. "Morning, morning," she said cheerfully without looking up. She was dressed too nicely for a lazy Saturday, hair curled, light makeup, wearing that fitted gray blouse he'd always liked. "Early start?" he asked, glancing at the clock. She smiled faintly, stirring sugar into her coffee. "I'm meeting a friend later. Figured I'd get some errands done first." "Friend?" he repeated casually, opening the fridge. "Yeah," she said, sipping her coffee. "You remember Ryan?" The carton of milk in his hand froze midair. He turned his head slowly. "Ryan?" She didn't seem to notice his expression, or maybe she pretended not to. "Yeah, Ryan from college. We dated for like a year. Ages ago." He set the milk down carefully. "I remember," he said, voice calm but clipped. "He's in town for work," she continued, casually flipping through her phone. "He reached out, said it'd be nice to catch up. We're grabbing dinner tomorrow." Julian blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. "Dinner?" She met his eyes then, tone light, but her body language defensive, shoulders slightly squared, chin lifted. "Just the two of you?" "Julian," she said with a small, almost condescending laugh. "Don't start. It's just dinner. I told you, he's in town for a couple of days." He studied her, heart pounding behind a mask of calm. "You're going to dinner with your ex-boyfriend." She sighed, exasperated. "God, you make it sound like I'm cheating or something." "I didn't say that. You implied it." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "No, I'm just trying to understand why my wife thinks it's a good idea to have dinner with someone she used to sleep with." Lena's expression hardened. "Because we're adults, Julian. Because not every interaction with someone of the opposite sex is about sex." He tilted his head slightly. "Then why didn't you mention this until now?" "I just decided this morning," she said a little too quickly, "and I didn't think I needed your permission." The word permission hit the air like a spark. "Permission," he repeated softly. "No, Lena, I'm talking about respect. Communication." She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. You trust me, right?" Julian forced a slow exhale through his nose. "Dinner with your ex, right? Totally normal." Her tone sharpened, defensive now. "It is normal, Julian. You're the one making it weird. Don't be controlling." He studied her face, confident, maybe too confident. Smug even. She genuinely thought she had the upper hand. "Controlling," he repeated, letting the word hang there. "That's what we're calling it now." "I'm serious," she said, folding her arms. "If I wanted to hide something, I wouldn't have told you. I'm just catching up with a friend." He nodded slowly, the silence between them stretching like a wire ready to snap. "Where are you going?" She hesitated, then said, "Haven't decided yet. Probably somewhere downtown." "Of course," he said. "Downtown. Neutral ground." She frowned at his tone. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," he said quickly, forcing a half smile. "Just thinking out loud." She gave him a look, half irritated, half dismissive, then grabbed her purse. "Anyway, I'm meeting Jenna in an hour. So can we not make this into a thing?" Julian nodded again, quietly. "Not a thing." Lena gave him one last pointed glance before walking toward the door. "Good," she said, "because I'd really appreciate it if, for once, you didn't overreact." He followed her to the hallway, leaning against the frame as she slipped on her heels. "Lena," he said calmly, "if I went out for dinner with an ex, how would that make you feel?" She paused, hand on the doorknob, lips pressed into a thin line. Then she looked over her shoulder with a faint smirk. "I wouldn't care," she said, "because I trust you." He smiled back, though his jaw was tight. "Good to know." She left, the door clicking shut behind her. Julian stayed frozen in the hallway for a long minute, staring at the door she'd just walked through. He could still smell her perfume in the air, sweet, familiar, now sour with meaning. He walked back into the kitchen, poured himself a cup of cold coffee, and sat down at the table, his mind running in circles. He tried to convince himself it was harmless. People met exes for dinner sometimes. Catching up, closure, maybe nostalgia. But there was something in her tone, something smug in the way she'd said, "Don't be controlling." It wasn't about dinner. It was about power. Later that night, Lena came home around 8, cheerful, animated. She'd gone shopping, showing off a new dress. A black one. Fitted. Elegant. "You like it?" she asked, twirling slightly. Julian swallowed. "It's nice. It's perfect for tomorrow," she said casually, turning to the mirror. "Tomorrow," he echoed. "Dinner," she reminded him. "With Ryan." He nodded, hiding the twist in his gut. "Right. Tomorrow." She met his eyes in the reflection. "Don't look at me like that. You're overthinking again." "I'm not thinking anything," he said softly. "Just wondering what you wear for just dinner." She smirked. "Maybe I just want to look good." "You always do," he said, his voice low, unreadable. That silenced her for a second. Then she shrugged it off and walked past him, humming to herself. Julian stood there for a long moment, his reflection staring back from the mirror she'd just used. His chest felt tight, but his mind calm. Too calm. The next morning, Lena woke early, cheerful again, humming in the bathroom while curling her hair. Julian sat on the edge of the bed, sipping coffee, pretending to read something on his phone. She stepped out, wearing the same black dress, her perfume trailing behind her like smoke. "Don't wait up," she said, grabbing her purse. He looked up and smiled faintly. "Wouldn't dream of it." She gave him a playful look, half daring, half dismissive. "Good." He watched her walk out again, confident, sure of herself, sure of him. As the door clicked shut, Julian leaned back in the chair, staring at the empty room. His heartbeat slowed, and a different kind of calm washed over him. The kind that came not from peace, but from decision. He set his mug down and whispered to the quiet room, his voice smooth and steady. "Sure, have fun." A tight smile formed on his face. Because while she thought she was walking into a harmless dinner, he was already planning something else entirely. Something that would change everything. Chapter 4, The Setup. Sunday morning dawned quiet, the kind of stillness that made every small sound louder. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, the faint shuffle of Lena moving through the house. Julian sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone lukewarm. Lena was in the hallway mirror again, fixing her makeup. She'd been at it for nearly 20 minutes, checking her eyeliner, tilting her head to admire the new dress she'd bought. The same black one she'd modeled the night before. She looked stunning, and she knew it. He watched her reflection in silence, the rhythm of her perfume spritzes marking time like a countdown. "Big night?" he asked finally, voice calm and measured. She didn't even look at him. "Don't start," she said. "I didn't say anything." "You implied something," she snapped, turning to face him. Julian gave a quiet laugh. "Lena, you're dressed like you're meeting a prince. Can't I admire the effort?" She frowned. "You can admire without the sarcasm." He held up a hand in surrender. "Fair enough." Her phone buzzed on the counter. She grabbed it, read the message quickly, then slipped it into her purse with a small smile. "I'll be back later," she said, already heading for the door. Julian leaned back in his chair, still smiling faintly. "Have fun at dinner with Ryan." She froze for half a second, then turned, mask firmly back in place. "It's just dinner," she said flatly. "Of course it is," he said. "I trust you." That seemed to irritate her more than any accusation could have. Without another word, she left, heels clicking sharply down the driveway. The moment the door shut, Julian's calm mask slipped away. He sat there for a long minute, his mind racing. He didn't want to scream or beg or play the suspicious husband. That's what she expected. No, he wanted her to feel something, to see herself from the outside. He took a slow sip of coffee, pulled out his phone, and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name. Tessa Monroe, Lena's best friend. Tessa had always been the sharp one, funny, outspoken, fiercely loyal. She'd known Lena since college, through all the breakups and makeups, through Ryan himself. If anyone would understand the irony of this situation, it was her. He hit call. After a couple of rings, her voice came through, light and familiar. "Julian? Hey, long time no see." "Hey, Tess," he said. "You got a minute?" "Sure. What's up?" He hesitated for a beat, then said, "You free for coffee this afternoon? I need to talk to you about something." Her tone shifted, curious now. "That sounds serious. Is everything okay?" Depends on how you define okay. They met at a small cafe near downtown, one that Lena used to drag him to on weekends. The irony wasn't lost on him. Tessa was already there when he arrived, wearing jeans, a soft gray sweater, and her usual air of warm intelligence. She smiled when she saw him, but quickly noticed the tension in his shoulders. "All right," she said, as he sat down across from her. "You look like a man about to deliver bad news." He chuckled lightly. "Something like that." The waitress came by, and they ordered coffee for both, nothing fancy. When she left, Julian leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. So he began. "Lena mentioned she's having dinner with someone tonight." Tessa tilted her head. "Oh, who?" He let a slow beat pass before answering. "Ryan." Her brows furrowed. "Ryan?" Then her eyes widened. "Wait, Ryan? The guy she cried about for months after college? That Ryan?" "The very same." Tessa let out a disbelieving laugh. "You're kidding." "No way. I wish I was." She shook her head. What the hell is she thinking? She said it's just dinner. Tessa rolled her eyes so hard it could have been heard. "Right. And I only go to the gym for the treadmill." Julian smirked. "Exactly." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Wow. I knew things were tense between you two, but that's bold, even for her." He looked down at his cup, swirling it slowly. "Yeah, she told me not to be controlling. Said I should trust her. And you're just letting it happen?" "That's the plan," he said, a hint of irony in his tone. Tessa frowned, studying him. "You sound too calm about this. What's your angle?" Julian finally looked up, eyes steady. "She wants to play a game? Fine. I'll play better." A slow, intrigued smile spread across Tessa's face. "I'm listening. I'm going to show up at the same restaurant," he said quietly, "with someone she won't expect." Her eyes widened slightly. "You're serious?" "Oh, I'm dead serious." Tessa leaned in. "And who's the lucky accomplice?" He gave her a pointed look. She blinked. "Wait me. Why not?" he said, smirking. "You're her best friend. She'd never see it coming. You'd be doing me a favor, and maybe giving her a much-needed reality check." Tessa stared at him for a moment, then broke into a grin. "You're insane." "Probably. And I kind of love it." They both laughed, softly at first, then louder, the tension between them easing into something playful. "But seriously," she said, lowering her voice, "are you sure you want to poke the bear like this?" Julian leaned back, eyes hard but calm. "I don't want to fight her, Tess. I just want her to see what it looks like from the other side." She's so wrapped up in her own narrative that she's forgotten what respect looks like. Tessa studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, I'm in." "You sure?" "Oh, absolutely," she said, smirking. "If she's dumb enough to meet Ryan, she deserves to sweat a little. Besides, I've been dying to wear that red dress you once called dangerous." He laughed. "Perfect." They spent the next hour going over the details. Julian found out where Lena had made the reservation. He noticed the open tab on her laptop earlier that morning. A high-end restaurant downtown, dim lighting, expensive wine, the kind of place people chose when they wanted to be seen looking good. Julian booked a table for two, deliberately choosing one on the opposite side of the dining room, but in clear line of sight. Tessa tapped her fingers against her cup, grinning. "So what's the move? You just waltz in, sit across from her, and pretend it's a coincidence." "Exactly," he said. "No drama, no scene. Just calm, confident conversation while she slowly unravels." She laughed. "That's evil." He smiled faintly. "That's fair." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, both sipping their coffee. "You know," Tessa said after a while, "part of me feels bad for her. The other part can't wait to see her face." Julian's gaze dropped to his hands. "If she wants to test boundaries," he said softly, "I'll show her what that feels like." Chapter 5. The Dinner Duel. The night crept in like a storm, slow, deliberate, charged with the kind of energy that hummed just beneath the skin. Julian stood in front of the bedroom mirror, straightening the cuffs of his dark blazer. He looked calm, controlled, maybe even handsome in a rugged, quietly confident way. He hadn't worn this particular jacket in a while. Lena used to say it made him look dangerously good. That memory almost made him laugh now. Almost. He took a moment to study his reflection. The man staring back wasn't broken. He wasn't desperate. He was composed, focused, and tonight he was about to teach a very subtle lesson about boundaries and respect. A final spray of the cologne she used to love, the one that always made her linger closer when things between them were good. It felt poetic somehow. Downstairs, Tessa was waiting in the living room, and she looked stunning. The red dress fit her perfectly, soft curls falling over one shoulder. There was a playful glint in her eye as she looked him up and down. "Wow," she said. "If I didn't know better, I'd think this was an actual date." He smirked. "Maybe it is, depending on how you play your cards." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're dangerous when you're calm. That's the point." They left the house together, Julian opening the car door for her with deliberate charm. It wasn't just for the plan, it was a statement. Every small gesture tonight would speak louder than words. The restaurant was warm, with low lighting and soft jazz when they arrived. The scent of wine and seared steak hung in the air. It was the kind of place where conversations were polite and glances meant more than they should. As they stepped inside, Julian felt Tessa's hand lightly rest on his arm. Her voice was low, teasing. "Ready?" He exhaled slowly, scanning the room, and there she was. Lena. She sat at a corner table, facing the entrance. She looked breathtaking, hair done, makeup sharp, that familiar silver necklace catching the light. And sitting across from her, grinning like a man who thought he'd just won the lottery, was Ryan. Julian's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't break stride. He led Tessa across the restaurant, his hand gently on her back, just enough to draw eyes. Lena's smile faltered mid-laugh. Her gaze locked on him. For a moment, the world went silent. Her lips parted slightly, shock flickering to confusion, then panic. Julian gave her the smallest, most maddeningly calm smirk. "Reservation for two," he told the host, his voice steady. "Yes, Mr. Cole," the host replied. "Right this way." Their table was perfectly positioned across the room, angled so he could see everything. Lena and Ryan couldn't avoid him. He pulled out Tessa's chair. She thanked him sweetly, and they both sat, smiling like people without a care in the world. Tessa leaned closer. "She's staring holes through you." "I know," he said, picking up the menu casually. "Let her." When the waiter arrived, they ordered wine. Julian spoke with quiet confidence, his tone relaxed, even warm. Every bit of it was deliberate, controlled poise. Across the room, Lena's hands fidgeted in her lap. Ryan leaned in, murmuring something that made her force a laugh. But her eyes kept darting over to Julian's table. It didn't take long before he made his move. As the waiter poured their wine, Julian caught Lena's gaze and offered a polite nod, lifting his glass slightly. Then he turned back to Tessa, grinning. Tessa played along beautifully. She laughed softly at everything he said, touching his arm here and there, her voice just loud enough to carry across the quiet restaurant. It didn't take long for the inevitable moment. Lena stood abruptly, Ryan mid-sentence, and walked toward their table. Her heels clicked like gunfire across the polished floor. "Julian," she said sharply, voice trembling just enough to betray her nerves. "What are you doing here?" Julian looked up, a picture of calm amusement. "Oh, Lena. Small world, huh? Didn't know you still came here." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't play games. Why are you here?" He smiled faintly, leaning back. "Just dinner. Don't be controlling." That line hit like a dart. Her mouth opened, then closed again, fury and disbelief warring across her face. Ryan, watching from their table, looked confused. "Lena, is that your husband?" The silence that followed was deafening. Lena froze. "Ryan, it's complicated." "Complicated?" Julian echoed lightly. "That's one way to put it." Ryan frowned, clearly uncomfortable. He glanced at Julian, then back at Lena. "You said you two were on a break." Tessa raised an eyebrow, playing the role perfectly. "Oh, you didn't tell him that you still live together?" Lena's face flushed crimson. "Tessa, stay out of this." "Oh, trust me," Tessa said, sipping her wine. "I wasn't planning to get in it. I just came for the steak." Julian chuckled under his breath, glancing at the menu again as if nothing around them was happening. "You're missing your appetizer." "Honey," he said calmly to Lena. "Wouldn't want it to get cold." The surrounding tables had started to notice the awkward tension thickening the air. Lena's voice dropped to a hiss. "This isn't funny, Julian." "No," he said quietly, eyes sharp now. "It's not." For a moment, their eyes locked, hers full of panic, his cool and unwavering. Then he looked away, dismissing her entirely. "Enjoy your dinner." Lena stood there, trembling, then turned sharply and went back to her table. Ryan looked pleased. He leaned in, whispering something, and Lena shook her head, her hands shaking. Tessa leaned closer to Julian, whispering, "That was brutal." "She made her choice," he said softly. "I just gave her the mirror." They ate slowly, unhurried. Julian made sure to laugh now and then, to look utterly at ease. Every smile, every casual touch of Tessa's hand on his sleeve, it all pushed Lena deeper into her spiral. Twice, Lena excused herself to the bathroom. The second time, she stayed for nearly 10 minutes. Julian could see the red rims of her eyes when she came back. Ryan looked like he wanted to disappear. When dessert came, Julian didn't order any. Instead, he called the waiter over, slipping his card out with the same composed smile. "Can you put the tab for that table?" He nodded toward Lena and Ryan. "On my bill as well?" The waiter blinked. "Both, sir." "Both," Julian said, his tone smooth. "Charge it to her ex, seems fitting." Tessa covered her mouth, half shocked, half impressed. The waiter nodded and walked off. Julian finished the last sip of his wine, then stood, ready to go. Tessa rose gracefully. "That was impressive." He smiled faintly, eyes still fixed on Lena across the room. Her shoulders slumped, her expression lost. "I'm just returning the favor," he said quietly. "Dinner's on me tonight." Chapter 6, The Aftermath. The ride home was quiet first. The night air drifted through the open window, cool and sharp, carrying with it the faint scent of Tessa's perfume and the fading echo of jazz from the restaurant. Julian's hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, calm and steady, though his mind was still replaying every flicker of emotion that had crossed Lena's face that night. Shock, anger, guilt, disbelief. Tessa finally broke the silence, turning slightly toward him. "That was savage," she said, half laughing, half in awe. "You didn't even raise your voice. I mean, you didn't need to." Julian smirked faintly, eyes still on the road. "Why would I?" She tilted her head. "Most men would have lost it, made a scene, shouted, thrown something." "Yeah," he said quietly. "And she would have walked away thinking I was the problem." Tessa nodded slowly, watching his profile in the dim light. "So you just flipped the mirror on her instead." He chuckled under his breath. "She made her choice. I just gave her a mirror." The car fell silent again. Streetlights passed in rhythmic flashes across the dashboard. "You know," Tessa said softly, "she's going to hate herself for this." Julian shrugged. "She already does. That's why she was crying in the bathroom." That made her glance at him, sharp, almost surprised. "You noticed?" "I notice everything," he said, the words carrying a quiet weight. "She used to cry for me. Tonight, she cried because of me." Tessa exhaled slowly, shaking her head. "You're cold, Julian." He smiled faintly. "No, I'm done." When he pulled up to her apartment complex, she turned to him before opening the door. "Hey," she said softly, "whatever happens next, don't let her pull you back in with guilt. You didn't cross a line tonight. You just reminded her where it was." He gave her a small nod. "Thanks, Tess, for everything." She hesitated, then smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Get some rest, hero." He watched her walk inside, heels clicking softly on the pavement, then sat in silence for a long moment before driving home. The house was dark when he pulled into the driveway. One light glowed faintly through the living room window. He took a deep breath before unlocking the door. The scent of her perfume still lingered faintly in the air, mixed with wine and tension. Lena wasn't in the living room. Her purse sat abandoned on the coffee table, her heels by the door. He heard the faint creak of the floorboards upstairs, slow footsteps pacing. He walked into the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and leaned against the counter, waiting. When she finally came down, she looked wrecked, eyes red, makeup smudged, hair falling loose from its pins. Her voice cracked before she even tried to steady it. "You humiliated me." He looked up slowly, meeting her gaze. You humiliated yourself, he said quietly. I just happened to be there. Her jaw trembled. You had no right to show up like that. With her of all people. Julian took a slow sip of water, his tone calm. Oh, I had every right. You told me not to be controlling, remember? So I wasn't. I'll let you do exactly what you wanted. Then I did the same. That's not the same thing, she snapped. He finally set the glass down, eyes hard. No, Lena, it's not. Because I didn't lie about where I was going or who I was with. She flinched, her lips parting slightly. I wasn't lying, she said, but even she didn't sound convinced. You went to dinner with your ex, he said flatly. You told him we were on a break. You cried when I showed up because you knew what it looked like, and for the first time, you saw what I've been feeling for months. Lena's voice broke. Julian, he raised a hand, cutting her off gently but firmly. Don't. Not tonight. She stood there, silent, chest rising and falling unevenly. I just wanted closure, she said finally, quieter now. You've been so distant lately. I need to talk to someone who remembered who I was before all of this. He laughed softly, bitterly. You mean before responsibility? Before marriage? Before loyalty started feeling like a cage? That's not fair. Neither is pretending you're single, he said sharply. Her eyes filled again. I made a mistake, okay? But what? He said, stepping closer, his voice still low measured. I embarrassed you? You embarrassed yourself, Lena. You walked into that restaurant like I didn't exist. I just reminded you I do. Tears spilled over, and she turned away, hands trembling. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, he said, his tone cooling again. You wanted attention, excitement, validation. And when it came from me, it didn't feel new anymore. Lena covered her face, sobbing quietly. Julian, please. He stared at her for a long moment. This woman he'd once adored, who used to laugh into his chest at midnight, who now looked like a stranger standing in his kitchen. Go to bed, he said finally. We'll talk when you slept. She dropped her hands slowly, looking at him with wide, broken eyes. You're not coming up? No, he said simply. She blinked. You're seriously going to sleep down here? Yeah, he said, walking past her toward the hallway. Sometimes silence hits harder than shouting. He left her standing there, small and shaking, as he made his way to the guest room. When he shut the door, he didn't lock it. He didn't need to. The distance between them was stronger than any lock could ever be. He sat on the edge of the bed for a while, staring at the wall. His phone buzzed once. Tessa, texting just 2 words. You okay? He typed back. Better than I thought. Then, after a pause, he set the phone down, leaned back, and closed his eyes. The silence of the house was heavy, thick with unspoken things. But for the first time in a long while, Julian felt in control. And as he drifted off to sleep, he realized something bitterly true. Sometimes, the most powerful sound in a dying marriage wasn't shouting. It was the quiet that came after. Chapter 7, Cracks and Confrontations. The days that followed were quieter than a graveyard at midnight. No yelling, no slammed doors, just silence. The kind that gnawed at the edges of every thought. Julian moved through the house like a ghost. He woke up early, made his coffee, left for work before she came downstairs, and didn't come home until after dark. When he did, he barely spoke. A polite hey, maybe a nod, and then he disappeared into the spare room or the garage. Lena tried at first to act like everything was fine, like their world hadn't just cracked open. She'd hum while doing the dishes, leave the TV on, try to start small talk. But Julian's calm, unreadable demeanor left her adrift. Finally, one night after dinner, she broke. "You're just going to keep ignoring me?" she snapped, crossing her arms as he rinsed his plate. Julian didn't even look up. Not ignoring, just choosing peace. "Peace," she echoed, her voice shaking. "You call this peace? You haven't said more than 3 words to me in 4 days." He dried his hands slowly, then turned to face her. "That's 3 more than you said to me the week before your just dinner." Lena flinched. "You're never going to let that go, are you?" He gave a tired smile. "You made sure I couldn't." She pressed her lips together, eyes glistening. "You've been distant for months, Julian. Don't act like I just woke up one morning and decided to blow up our marriage." Ryan just listened. He laughed softly, the sound low and sharp. "Funny, I thought you preferred men who buy dinner. Her mouth fell open, stunned. You're unbelievable. And you're predictable, he said, voice calm but cutting. Blame me for being distant while you were emotionally cheating 3 steps ahead. Lena's tones softened instantly, switching tactics. It wasn't like that. I just needed someone to talk to. Someone who didn't look at me like I was a chore. He tilted his head slightly. Someone who didn't know you well enough to call you out on your lies. You mean? Her breath hitched, and she turned away, blinking fast. You always twist everything. No, he said, his voice quiet but edged with steel. You do. You twist it until you believe it yourself. She turned back, eyes wet now. Julian, please. I messed up, okay? But I didn't sleep with him. Can't we just start over? He studied her for a moment, long enough to make her squirm. Then he picked up his keys from the counter. Maybe you should start over with yourself. And he walked out. Over the next week, Julian channeled everything, anger, confusion, grief, into motion. He started going to the gym again, 5 a.m. sharp. The place became his escape, his therapy. The sound of weights clanking drowned out the echoes of old arguments. Sweat replaced the numbness. Every rep was a release. Coworkers noticed the shift too. Damn, Cole. One of them joked, you training for a comeback tour or a midlife crisis? Julian just smiled. Rebuilding phase. And then there was Tessa. They saw each other occasionally, lunches, gym sessions, little check-ins that started to feel grounding. She never flirted, never crossed a line. But she had a way of looking at him that reminded him what respect felt like. One evening, after a long workout, she handed him a water bottle and said, You're starting to look like the man she forgot she married. He gave a quiet laugh. Yeah? Maybe I'm starting to remember him too. Tessa smiled knowingly. Good. Don't let her rewrite your story. Lena, meanwhile, was unraveling. The power balance had shifted, and she felt it with every passing day. The man who used to chase her attention now barely looked her way, and that drove her insane. She started watching him more closely, checking the mileage on his car, glancing through his gym bag, even trying to peek at his phone when he wasn't looking. One morning, she caught herself scrolling through his texts while he was in the shower, heart pounding like a drum. When he came out, towel around his waist, she froze, caught mid-scroll. He stopped in the doorway, calm as ever. You find what you're looking for. Her cheeks flushed. I wasn't checking my phone, he finished, eyebrow raised. You changed your password last month, remember? I didn't say a word. She stammered. I was just worried. You've been acting strange. He smirked. Strange, right? You mean not desperate? Who is Tessa to you now? She demanded suddenly, voice cracking. You're always with her lately. Don't tell me you're innocent, either. Julian laughed, an actual, amused laugh this time. You really don't like mirrors, do you? She glared. That's not funny. It's ironic, he said. You spent months glued to your phone, whispering to your ex, telling me I was controlling. Now you're digging through my texts, looking for ghosts that aren't there. Lena's lip trembled. You're trying to make me crazy. No, he said evenly. You're just getting a taste of your own medicine. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She stormed off instead, slamming the bedroom door so hard the frame rattled. Julian just sighed. By the end of the week, the story of the restaurant scene had spread through their friends' circle like wildfire. It started small. One of Lena's co-workers mentioned seeing her there. Then someone else brought it up at the gym. Soon, whispers turned into full-blown gossip. She showed up with her ex, and Julian walked in with her best friend. Someone said at a mutual friend's party. That's cinematic. Another laughed. He didn't even yell, just sat there looking smug. Savage. Julian pretended not to care, but every so often, someone would clap him on the shoulder or give him a knowing nod. Heard about your little dinner stunt, one of his old friends said. You handled it like a king. He didn't bask in it, but he didn't deny it either. Lena, on the other hand, couldn't escape it. She'd go to brunch with mutual friends and feel the side glances, the half-whispered sympathy. She tried to act unaffected, but the cracks were showing. One night, she confronted him again, pacing the living room like a caged animal. Do you have any idea what people are saying about me? She demanded. He didn't look up from his laptop. Probably the truth. They think I'm some kind of villain, she cried. Julian finally met her eyes, calm and unbothered. You're not a villain, Lena. You're just the reason I stopped being the hero. That shut her up. For a long time, she just stood there, tears threatening again, but no words coming. Julian closed his laptop, stood, and brushed past her on his way upstairs. In his head, a single thought echoed, cold and clear. Sometimes silence wasn't distance, it was evolution. And as he climbed the stairs, leaving her standing alone in the glow of the living room light, the gap between them felt irreversible. Chapter 8, The Truth Comes Out. It happened on a Wednesday night, one of those evenings that felt heavy before anything had even gone wrong. Julian sat in his office, the glow of the computer screen flickering against his face. He told himself for weeks that he didn't need to know the truth, that ignorance, in this case, might be a kind of mercy. But there was something about the way Lena had been acting lately, her nervous energy, her random bursts of kindness, the way she laughed too loud at nothing. It wasn't guiltless. It was performative. And when guilt wears a mask, it always slips eventually. It slipped tonight. While transferring files to the shared laptop they both occasionally used, Julian found a synced folder, one that wasn't supposed to exist. It had her phone's backup data. Photos, notes, messages. His pulse slowed as his cursor hovered over it. He hesitated only once, then opened it. The screen filled with words that cut deeper than any confession ever could. Ryan, you looked amazing today. I miss that smile. Lena, stop. You make me blush again. Ryan, you did more than blush last night. Lena, don't remind me. I feel guilty sometimes. Ryan, then don't think about it. Just us. Julian sat there for a long time. No shouting, no shaking hands, just a quiet, consuming stillness. It wasn't surprise, it was confirmation. The gut feeling that had been clawing at him for months had finally found evidence to feed on. He scrolled further down, and the messages grew worse. Jokes that belonged to intimacy, references to secret meetups before the just-dinner incident, small lies wrapped in laughter. Lena, Julian's been so distant. It's like living with a ghost. Ryan, then let me be the one who makes you feel alive again. Something inside him hardened then, something he didn't even know could still break. He didn't yell. He didn't throw the laptop or punch the wall. He simply hit print. The printer hummed in the quiet of the house. Page after page slid out, evidence of betrayal, each one a piece of her secret life. When it finished, Julian neatly stacked the papers, aligned the edges, and placed them in the center of the kitchen table like a gift waiting to be unwrapped. Then he poured himself a drink. Whiskey, no ice. He sat there in silence, sipping slowly, waiting. The clock ticked. The house creaked. The guild in the air felt like it already knew what was coming. At 9:17, Lena's car pulled into the driveway. The door opened, and she walked in with her usual attempt at normalcy. Hey, she said, setting her purse down. You're up late. He didn't answer, just gestured toward the table. You left something there. She frowned, confused, and stepped closer. Then she saw the stack of papers. At first, she didn't understand. Then she read. Her breath hitched. The color drained from her face. She stumbled back, gripping the counter for support as her lips trembled. Julian, wait, I can explain. Don't, he said, voice low but steady. You said it was just dinner. He lifted his glass slightly, eyes never leaving hers. Guess you left out dessert. Tears spilled instantly. It's not what it looks like. Don't insult me, he snapped, his calm fracturing for the first time. You weren't just texting an old friend, Lena. You were having an affair. Emotionally, physically, whatever you want to call it, it's betrayal. You lied. You looked me in the eye and swore I was imagining things. She stepped forward, shaking her head desperately. Wasn't he just Julian, please? It got out of hand. I didn't mean for it to. He cut her off sharply. You didn't mean to? You met him behind my back, flirted, touched, kissed, whatever else. Don't you dare act like you didn't mean to. Every text here was a choice. Her voice cracked. He made me feel seen. You stopped looking at me. He laughed bitterly. Right. I didn't look at you enough. So your solution was to find a man who'd already dumped you once. Brilliant logic. She winced. That's cruel. So, is lying, he said flatly. Lena reached for his arm, but he stepped back. I didn't sleep with him, she whispered. I swear to you, Julian, I didn't. He slammed his glass down on the counter, the sound echoing like a gunshot. And I'm supposed to believe you now? After this? He gestured to the pile of printed proof. You were halfway out the door, and you still had the audacity to act like I was paranoid. She covered her face, sobbing. Please don't do this. Don't just walk away. Julian exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled, trying to keep the storm contained. Do you have any idea what it's like, he said quietly, to watch the woman you build a life with look at another man like he's the one who matters? She cried harder, shaking her head. I never stopped loving you. He gave a cold, hollow laugh. You just forgot how then? Lena's sobs turned to broken gasps. It was a mistake, Julian. I was lost. I didn't know what I wanted. He leaned forward, voice cutting through her noise like a blade. You wanted attention. You wanted validation. And you found in the easiest place a man who told you what you wanted to hear. She sank to her knees, crying uncontrollably. Please don't leave me. He looked down at her. This version of her he didn't recognize anymore. The strong, confident woman he'd fallen for was gone, replaced by someone who only cared when the consequences arrived. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy with everything unsaid, the years, the trust, the love that used to hold them together. Finally, Julian broke it. I'm done fighting for someone who surrendered first. He turned and walked upstairs, the creak of every step sounding like the slow collapse of everything they built. Lena stayed on the kitchen floor, sobbing into her hands, whispering his name like a prayer that no longer had power. He packed methodically. A few shirts, jeans, his laptop, a photo of his late father, the essentials. When he zipped the bag, he glanced around the room. It felt like a museum of a life that no longer belonged to him. The bed, the nightstand, the framed wedding photo on the wall, all of it was tainted now. Downstairs, Lena's sobs had quieted into hiccuping breaths. When he descended the stairs, she looked up with swollen eyes, her face streaked with tears. Where are you going? She whispered, voice trembling. Somewhere I can breathe, he said simply. She stood, shaky and desperate. Please, Julian, we can fix this. He shook his head. No, Lena, you broke it. And the worst part? You did it with your eyes open. He slung the bag over his shoulder and paused at the door. For a heartbeat, he almost looked back but didn't. She took a step toward him, voice breaking. I still love you. He turned the handle slowly, answering without turning around. Then you should have acted like it. The door shut behind him with a soft click, and Lena collapsed again, her sobs echoing through the empty house. Outside, Julian walked to his car, the night air cold against his skin, his chest heavy but clear. He didn't know where he was going, just that it had to be away. And as the engine roared to life, he glanced once in the rearview mirror at the house where his marriage had died, then looked forward, his face set, eyes burning. He drove off, leaving her sobbing behind. Chapter 9, The Revenge Weekend. The highway stretched out in front of him, sun bleeding across the horizon as Julian's truck hummed steadily toward the coast. It had been years since he'd driven this route, the same one he and Lena used to take for their weekend getaways. Every mile back then had been filled with laughter, shared playlists, and stolen kisses at red lights. Now it was just wind, silence, and the low growl of the engine. He wasn't running. Not anymore. This trip wasn't about escape. It was about reclaiming something that had been taken from him. When he pulled into the small coastal inn, the salty air hit him like a memory. The sound of waves crashing, the distant chatter of beachgoers, it all felt like déjà vu, but cleaner somehow. Less haunted. Tessa was already waiting by the boardwalk, leaning against the railing with a coffee in hand. She wore a light sundress and an easy smile, one that didn't demand or pity, just warmth. Didn't think you'd actually come, she said as he approached. He smirked. You invited me. I'm not that hard to convince. She handed him a cup. You looked like you needed air, and maybe a reminder that there's life beyond heartbreak. He chuckled, taking a sip. You're not wrong. They walked along the beach in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Every now and then, Tessa would nudge him, teasing just enough to make him grin. So, she said after a while, how does it feel being the guy who outplayed his cheating wife in her own game. Julian exhaled, his eyes on the ocean. I thought it'd feel better. Revenge always sounds cleaner in your head. Still, she said, tilting her head, that dinner stunt? Legendary. You hit her ego harder than any shouting match could. He smirked faintly. She needed a mirror. I just held it up. They sat down on a bench overlooking the surf. A few kids were building sandcastles, couples strolled by hand in hand. It should have hurt, but instead, it grounded him. You know, he said quietly, I spent years trying to be everything she needed. Working late, saving for the house, planning our future. I thought loyalty was enough. Tessa looked at him, her tone softening. You gave her stability. She mistook that for boredom. He nodded slowly. I lost myself trying to keep her happy. And when she started slipping away, I thought fighting harder would fix it. He paused, the wind tugging at his shirt. Turns out, sometimes you have to let someone fall, just so you can stop falling with them. Tessa smiled sadly. That's the kind of wisdom people pay therapists for. He laughed under his breath. Guess heartbreak's cheaper, just costs your peace for a while. They spent the evening by a beachside fire pit, sharing old stories, cheap wine, and quiet laughter. There was no tension between them, no agenda, just mutual understanding. Every now and then, their hands brushed, but neither pulled away. It wasn't romantic yet. It was something slower, deeper, a kind of healing connection that didn't need defining. As the night grew colder, Tessa leaned her head on his shoulder. You know what I think? She murmured. What's that? She thought she broke you, Tessa said softly. But she just reminded you what kind of man you actually are. Julian looked out at the dark waves, a small, genuine smile forming for the first time in a long time. She thought she broke me, he said quietly, repeating her words. Then, with a slow breath, his voice firmed, conviction threading through every syllable. She just reminded me who I am. Chapter 10, The Lesson. The morning sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Julian's apartment, bouncing off the polished hardwood floors. He stood in the kitchen, a protein shake in hand, looking out over the city skyline. Months had passed since the divorce was finalized. Months in which he had rebuilt himself, body, mind, and soul. The man in the mirror was leaner, stronger, sharper, but there was more than just physical transformation. There was a calmness, a quiet confidence that had been absent for years. The phone buzzed on the counter, lighting up with a name he hadn't seen in months. Lena. He didn't move immediately. His thumb hovered over the screen. She had tried a few messages before, all deleted or ignored. But this one, the tone was different. Regret seeped through each word. You look happy. Julian exhaled slowly. He could almost hear the hesitation behind the words, the unspoken plea for forgiveness, or perhaps a chance. He sipped a shake, savoring the quiet moment before replying. I am, he typed slowly, deliberately. Took losing you to remember myself. He hit send, then sat back on the counter, eyes drifting to the skyline. Memories came unbidden, the lies, the late-night texts, the restaurant, her tears. He didn't feel anger anymore, not the consuming kind that once kept him awake. That anger had transformed into clarity. He understood now that his life had been on pause while he tried to salvage someone who had already chosen to walk a different path. Another buzz. Another message from her. Can we talk? Julian scrolled past it. The words were meaningless now. He had nothing left to give her, not forgiveness, not explanations, not tears. He picked up his phone, tapped her contact, and deleted it. Gone. Not blocked. Not muted, just gone. The gesture was quiet, but absolute. He leaned back, taking in the silence of the apartment. It wasn't lonely. It wasn't empty. It was expansive. His life was his again. And for the first time in a long time, he realized that the pain he'd carried for months, the betrayal, the heartbreak, had served a purpose. It had reminded him who he was, what he was worth, and what he would never settle for again. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Tessa, smiling, holding 2 coffees. Morning, she said, stepping inside. Julian grinned. Morning. Just enjoying the quiet before the world reminds me it's chaotic. She handed him a coffee. You look well. Thriving, he corrected, taking a sip. Not just surviving anymore. Thriving. She laughed softly. I've never seen you this at peace. Peace, he said, leaning back against the counter. I had to lose a lot to find it. They shared a quiet smile. No awkwardness, no tension, just mutual respect, connection, and a shared understanding of what it meant to come out stronger on the other side. Julian glanced out the window, at the sun reflecting off the buildings, the hum of life moving around him. The city didn't wait, didn't judge, and neither did he. He realized that trust and love wasn't about blind faith. It wasn't about giving someone a chance to hurt you. It was about seeing who stands beside you when they could have walked away and choosing to stand tall yourself regardless of who stays or leaves. He set his coffee down, feeling the warmth of the cup seep into his hands, and whispered to himself. Trust isn't about giving someone a chance to hurt you. It's about seeing who still stands beside you when they could have walked away. The apartment was quiet again, peaceful, and for the first time in years, Julian felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be.